Darren Ferris torches the Leafs. Patrick Kane back in Chicago. And what Maple Leafs would you want back in Toronto?
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, the daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. A few things that we got to get into today, Dave. A couple little newsy items. The Marlies announcing a slew of changes to their staff, so we'll get into that. There's this wild clip from Darren Ferris, Mitch Marner's agent, that we're gonna play it. It's just under 2 minutes long, but I think it's worth playing. Essentially, just torching the Maple Leafs organization, and it caught the ire of Leafs Nation. So we'll get into that. Patrick Kane signs in Toronto, and we got a Friday 5-pack coming up for you guys as well. So a fun pack show to end off the week. But I think we got to start with the Darren Ferris situation here. The agent for Mitch Marner, Dave, was on the Puckpedia podcast, and I don't know why he wanted to. On July 23rd or 22nd, he was on the podcast, why he felt he needed to anger Leafs Nation, but he accomplished that, if that was his goal the other day.
Yeah, I every time that we feels like Leafs Nation has moved on from this, something always pulls them in. And I hate to say this, but this is not like, I think people should be getting the picture right now of maybe what exactly the issue is. It ain't Leafs fans are made to be the scapegoat in a lot of ways through all of this. I think the last couple days should show that it's not. Like, it's at this point, it's not anymore, because Leafs Nation are not bringing up Mitch Marner. I haven't heard Mitch Marner being brought up since the Cup final. No one's talking about him. No one's, complaining about what happened. It seems to be only one side that's bringing all this up.
Yeah, and I don't know why we have agents who are currently agents in the NHL going on podcasts and talking about their clients. I don't see the benefits of this. Why don't we play the clip so that whoever missed it knows what we're talking about. But Darren Ferris on the Puckpedia hockey show and talked about Marner's departure from Toronto and overall his time here, and how really, I guess, the team didn't protect Marner while in Toronto. Let's play the clip.
He really bled for that team. He's never protected by his organization, in my opinion.
You had a big decision and a big situation last offseason with one of your guys, Mitch Marner, right? He was Toronto through and through. They held on to Mitch to the end of the season, and then it was decided that he wasn't going to re-sign there. So then they did a sign and trade with Vegas.
He's really enjoying it there. He's got a clear mind. He's able to focus on hockey. It's unfortunate in Toronto, the way things went. When he first signed with the Leafs in his entry level, they did not want him to have performance bonuses in there. Mitch decided he would help the team out. They asked him to. I had some pressures from guys that were working for the London Knights and also working for the Leafs. Mitch just told me, Darren, I want to sign this. So against my, wishes, he did. They promised nobody get him. And as you know, they didn't fulfill that. He soon found out that, a promise that isn't in the contract isn't a promise. So nobody ever talks about the fact that, Mitch did the team a favor back then. And there was a lot of misinformation out there on what transpired. To this day, people say he didn't show up for training camp. Well, he did. They didn't miss a day of training camp, which just kept spiraling into information that created, made him the villain here in the city. I think the majority of people support him, but there's always those ones that are fanatic about it. Frankly, as time went on, became the focus of everything. scrutinized for every game. Him and his family criticized after every loss, receiving threats on social media, which was disturbing. I received plenty of disparaging comments. And you got to remember, Mitch was carjacked in Toronto, and every year the team came up short. He was the one singled out. It's funny because hockey is a team game. You can't pinpoint one person. This is a guy that had the most playoff points on the team and who played through a fractured ankle in the Boston series.
All right, so there's a few things to get in there. I think there's like 5 or 6 different complaints there about from Darren Ferris, which, hey, to be able to get in like 6 complaints within a 2-minute clip, a minute 50 clip, is pretty impressive. But the few things that I think we got to touch on, where he talked about how they were never protected by the organization, and then he's still complaining. Like, how long has it been since that ELC? It's been over 10 years.
2016, right?
Yeah,
Around the same time as Matthews, before Matthews, technically.
Yeah, and then on it coming out of his ELC, they signed him to a very healthy contract worth what, $10.9 million, nearly $11 million coming out of that. So I think they made it right on that deal. So the fact that we're still complaining about these performance bonuses 10 years later as a reason for why you were upset with Toronto and wanted to leave because you remembered that, like, get serious. Come on now. Like, they paid you so much money over, the 9 years that you were there. To complain about that still to this day is ridiculous. And I'm not going to put words in Marner's mouth, but I don't think Darren Ferris is talking about this without that being a point of contention for Mitch Marner either. But still, I think that's ludicrous. And then complaining, saying, oh, but then someone else got performance bonuses. Yeah, I don't think the Leafs expected to end up with the number 1 pick and end up with a guy like Austin Matthews. Bit of a different situation.
Oh,
when
sorry,
you
they gave Austin Matthews the first overall pick and franchise center performance
right.
bonuses.
Right. It's a bit of a different situation. Like, I'm sorry. It's just totally different. Things change. And that's, probably what ended up happening. Build a bridge and get over it, Mitch. The other thing he said was, people say he didn't show up for training camp that year when he came out of his ELC and, held out. Like, sure, I guess he did end up signing either, I think it was like the night of training camp or the first day of camp. Like, he was there. I think it was in St. John's, Newfoundland at the time, I believe. Yeah, and sure, he was there and he signed whatever, but it was still a distraction heading into training camp. Like, I remember
he was going to hold out. He wasn't going to show up to training camp if he didn't get what he wanted in the contract.
100%, and that's the only reason why he was there. Like, it's because he got paid very handsomely coming out of that ELC. So, that part, it's like, you're only telling half the story there too, Darren. And the carjacking thing, like, that had nothing to do with the Leafs. Like, why are you bringing up the fact that he was carjacked? It's not like Toronto employed these goons to go out and carjack the guy.
It's not like it was the Leafs fan that's like, oh, this is Mitch Marner's car.
Right.
Grab it.
Right. Like, that's a completely, different. There's been a lot of carjackings in the city of Toronto. It's not one of the safer cities anymore. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. He unfortunately was part of that situation. And I get it. Very traumatizing, I'd imagine. I mean, I had my car broken into and had, thousands of dollars in possession stolen. Like, trust me, I feel for the guy. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't a hockey-related situation. Like, to blame the Maple Leafs organization for that, or to even bring it up when you're talking about, his downtime in Toronto, it's like, that one's, that's not hockey-related. Like, what are the Leafs going to do? Like, I'm sure they did whatever they could to help him in that situation.
Sure they ended up finding the car. I'm pretty sure that they ended up finding a car and all, like, as a part of like they were doing the police actually ended up finding the car
in like a big sweep. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who've had their car jacked over the last few years. Like, this has been an epidemic in Toronto, especially with like the Range Rovers. I know a lot of people who have had those cars stolen. Whether, like, some of them right up their driveway. Like,
Yeah.
like
people have had their house. I know in my area around the corner from me, people have had their houses broken into so
Yeah.
that thieves can get their cars
Yeah.
at gunpoint. Like
Dude.
it happened. Like this is just unfortunately the reality. And unfortunately, when you drive a car like that, there's a bit of a target. And it's unfortunate. I'm not saying Mitch Marner put himself in that position. It's just that's reality. It can happen anywhere.
But it's not a hockey related thing. Is what
No.
is what bothers me about Darren Ferris bringing it up as part of his monologue for why he was wronged by the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. Like, it just had nothing to do with it. So yeah, I don't know. Like, there's just a few things about it that kind of chaps my ass. Where it's like, come on, like most of the stuff doesn't matter anymore. Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like it shouldn't matter. And if he in 2025 made his decision, he didn't want to return to the Maple Leafs because of these reasons, for the reasons that happened, reasons that were not hockey related, and reasons that were, back in when he signed that deal, 2018, 29. Yeah. Like,
2019, the contract he signed, the 6-year deal.
yeah. Like, is that when you decided that you weren't going to come back and be a Maple Leaf? Like you said, this is the last one. I'm clearly not, because he signed another contract after that. And it wasn't a team friendly deal by any stretch of the imagination when he signed that $11 million contract, 10.9.
Go and listen to the full interview. He brings up how at one point in time he brought up to Brad Treliving about looking to make a move, and he would consider a Western Conference team. And he talked about the Carolina situation as if like Brad Treliving kind of just threw that out there as an option potentially. Like they were looking to move in like January. Like I think that's when he was saying like around January. Like they were not looking to return to Toronto in the way that he was talking about it. I look back actually at the Toronto Star when Austin Matthews signed his contract. Darren Ferris, within the days after, spoke to the Toronto Star, and he had this to say about that Matthews contract. That's probably the best contract in the NHL. There's no team-friendly discount there. Right then and there, that's where things started to turn, because I've never seen any other agent talk about another player's contract and say, and then he went on to say that Mitch Marner's been lowballed. There's a reason we've come to this point. No one else is taking a discount here. They want Marner to take a discount. Mitch did them a favor on the entry-level deal. Like that, he's just regurgitating. Like when I heard the ELC stuff, I said, yeah, I've heard this story.
Oh, yeah.
7 years ago in the Toronto Star. Like, I don't know any other player that has a gripe about their entry-level deal being a point of contention with an organization. William Nylander did not get the same bonus as Austin Matthews got. He got the same ones that Mitch Marner got. William Nylander had a more contentious contract negotiation and signed. We talked about at one point that that extension ended up being pretty reasonable for William Nylander, other than the fact that Kyle Dubas took it all the way to the 11th hour to get it signed. And then he still signed for fewer than Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, despite having a 100-point season when he signed that deal. Like, William Nylander learned his lesson. Austin Matthews learned his lesson. Don't make these negotiations hard. And the Leafs couldn't. And then everyone makes it seem as if the Leafs may have fumbled the Marner situation. I'm less inclined to think that the Leafs fumbled it, and more so the Marner camp already made up their minds of what to do, and the Leafs were put in a tough position and probably should have traded Mitch Marner well before that. Like
that's a whole, bigger can of worms where, again, if you go back in an alternate universe where Kyle Dubas doesn't get traded or Kyle Dubas doesn't get fired back in 2023, there's a good chance and that was before the no trade clause kicked in for both Marner and Willie. There's a good chance he moves on from one of them, and it could have been Mitch Marner. Could have got a hefty package for Mitch Marner, and he would have had no say in the matter and what happened. So, but obviously we know what happened. He gets fired. Treliving comes on. He didn't want to make that big decision within being on the job for 3 weeks, and the rest is history. Obviously, we know how it all played out. In an alternate universe, things could have been different, but they weren't. And this is the hand that the Leafs were dealt, that Marner was dealt. And it was a messy exit, obviously, last year with the reports of him turning down a potential trade to Carolina that could have netted the Leafs a big return that, obviously would have set them up for better success this season. And it never came to fruition. He said, no, thanks, but no thanks, which is his prerogative. I think he had a pregnant wife at the time, didn't want to have to move out of the city, which is fine. Like I respect that. But to then come out and just, continue to see his agent, berate the Leafs and bring up all this stuff from the last 6-7 years. It's like, come on now. Like, what are we doing? Like, just move on. I think the Leafs have moved on. Leafs Nation's, starting to move on. It seems like it's still kind of pecking at Marner. And the fact that he didn't finish the job this year, the fact that he didn't win the cup, and I think it hurts him that there was a portion of Leafs Nation that was rooting against him because they didn't want to see him go on and have success. I would imagine that probably did hurt him as well. Like, it just took a little shot to his ego.
Yep.
And, so, it's still eating at him, I guess, all this stuff that's gone on. He doesn't seem to be truly, truly happy, I guess, when it comes to all this. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the situation there. Thought we'd break that down a little bit with Darren Ferris joining the podcast there, the Puckpedia podcast. As Dave mentioned, go and take a listen to the whole podcast. There's a little bit more to the story than just that 2-minute clip. They talk a little bit more about what happened in Toronto and how things unfolded here. So go take a listen to that and kind of get more of the full story of what happened there. All right, on the other side, a couple of quick announcements from the Toronto Marlies. They're making changes there in their front office. Patrick Kane has signed. We'll tell you where he's going. And we got a Friday 5-pack coming up for you as well. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Indeed. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certification, location, so less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. I've been talking to you, and in the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Usually the biggest difference isn't someone doing more work. It's actually having somebody who knows exactly what needs to happen, and it helps everything run smoother. So make sure you spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you, as we are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the duration of the summer. We will be back to a full 5-day sked after Labor Day. The Toronto Marlies with a couple of announcements. Dave, would you like to inform the class what's going on with the Marlies? I know that they announced a couple of front office and coaching decisions here for the upcoming season.
Yeah, we already knew that Steve Sullivan was named the head coach, and that Mark Giordano was going to be an assistant coach on the team. Chris Bourque was named the assistant general manager. So, as some of you may know, Chris Bourque, pretty, I wouldn't say well-known name, but he, former NHLer.
Yeah.
He's
I think he was a member of their scouting staff. I think he was part of their NCAA collegiate scouting staff for a little bit, and they clearly like the work that he's done. And now he's going to get an opportunity to be an AGM under Ryan Hardy. So
Somebody
a
who
nice
knows
little
the
promotion.
AHL life. He played
Yeah.
a lot of time in the AHL, so someone who knows that life quite well. Denver Manderson and Greg Moore are also going to be assistant coaches, so that kind of rounds out the coaching staff. You got now somebody underneath Ryan Hardy. Um, I think this is also helping a little bit with Ryan Hardy, because I'm sure he's going to do a little more with the Leafs. He'll see. So they said that Ryan Hardy will continue to oversee hockey operations. Mike Dixon is still hanging around. Bork will be added. And yeah, so they've got the coaching staff kind of all handled there, and they've, I guess, a little more focus being put on the development of the Leafs minor league system. So Manderson is kind of now the director of minor league development. So yeah, it's just, putting, as much as, the Marlies, it was a great year for them, winning the Calder Cup and everything like that. There's also, it's a dual road. Like they're not just about winning, they're also about development. So I think just reminding, everyone the priority that this organization kind of has to get that kind of maybe put in a position like it was probably 10 years ago, when we saw a lot of Marlies graduate to the
Yeah.
Leafs. There are going to be some Marlies graduating to the Leafs eventually, but maybe not to the extent that we had seen in the past.
Yeah, I think you'll see a handful of these Marlies make their way, into the system. It's a much better team today than it was back in, 2018, the last time that the Marlies made a cup run. I will say that the prospect pool was, beefier at the time, but there's still going to be some guys who will make their way down there. So yeah, so there's the latest when it comes to the Toronto Marlies. Greg Moore, if that name sounds familiar, he was the Toronto Marlies head coach after Sheldon Keefe. Like, he took over after Keefe did, and he was the Marlies head coach for a couple of years there. So he returns to the Marlies as an assistant under Steve Sullivan. Some bigger news around the NHL, however. Patrick Kane has made his decision. We knew that it was between the Buffalo Sabres and the Chicago Blackhawks. Well, Patrick Kane decides to go back to where it all started. He went to the Chicago Blackhawks, signs a deal, 2 years, $16 million, and he'll probably finish out his career there alongside Connor Bedard, making, giving him an opportunity to kind of play under his, put him under his wing in a way, and maybe take off a little bit of pressure from Connor Bedard by having a franchise icon like Patrick Kane in the fold. I think it's a good move for Chicago. I mean, they need to do something. I don't think Kane is the player he used to be, obviously. I don't think anyone expects for him to be that 100-point guy. But I think that this is a good move for Chicago to bring in, a veteran who obviously knows the city. He's a franchise icon. I think it should take a little bit of pressure off Connor Bedard heading into the fourth year of his career.
Yeah, and this is a team that we were looking at, we've talked about it. Like, Connor Bedard needs someone to help guide him through all this. Like,
Yeah,
you can't expect him to do it all on his own. And I know a lot of people looking at $8 million for Patrick Kane, which pretty nice $5 million increase, but at the same time, it's not like Chicago is hurting on the salary cap
no.
they're penny pitching to make the money work.
Is there is there performance bonuses? Like, is that including bonuses? Like, I wonder if the base. I didn't take a look at the breakdown, but I wonder if the base is a little lower and it's just can be up to 16 based on bonuses, or if they just threw him a bone. They're like, we got to get to the cap floor.
He has a base salary of $1 million, and then he has a signing bonus, so he's just getting straight cash.
Okay, so he's guaranteed the 16th. It's not performance bonus.
Yeah, so he got an $8 million signing bonus, so his salary is $1 million this year, and then next year there's a $6 million signing bonus with $1 million. Like he's essentially making, and he's got a no movement clause. So this is like I guess, incentive for him to maybe It's funny though, like incentive to return to Chicago, but at the same time, he's getting It's a nice little it's a nice incentive for him, I guess, to get a nice could be a final contract for him. At 37, that takes him to 39. This is probably his last deal. Again, I know it's a lot of money, but Chicago can afford it. Like they've got, I think they have over $8 million in cap space right now, and they just signed Bedard to that extension. So that's after the Bedard extension. That's Bowen Brown next year that extension kicks in, but Chicago's got money. They got money to play with.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So Patrick Kane back in Chicago, back to where it all began. And it kind of inspires our Friday 5-pack, Dave, where I've compiled a list of 5 Maple Leafs that we'd like a reunion with. Maybe if, there's no Patrick Kane out there, obviously, who's like a franchise icon who's still out in the NHL. Like you could obviously go back. If you can bring back Prime Sundin or Prime Dougie, different story. But 5 players around the NHL that we would most like a reunion with. So I've got a 5-pack, and we'll get to that next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. It's true in sports, just like it is in business. One thing that really stands out to me about organizations, get everyone pulling in the same direction. It's not usually just one player or one coach. It's a coordinated effort across the entire organization that makes it successful. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube as well. So Patrick Kane going back to Toronto, I thought this is a perfect little Friday, Chicago, sorry. This is a perfect little Friday 5-pack of 5 players that I would like Toronto to have a reunion with. Now the qualifications, Dave, I made for this list here was they had to spend at least 1 full season here in Toronto. So, a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, for example, I did not have on this list because he only spent a few months. So that was my qualification. Had to at least spend 1 season as a Toronto Maple Leaf. And, some guys who maybe only played a couple of games for whatever reason. So that was the only qualification that I made. Would you like to hear my list?
All right, let's hear it.
Coming in at number 5, I have Connor Brown. Connor Brown coming in at number 5 for me. I think that Connor Brown still, can play a decent level of hockey, where I think he could be a contributor in the bottom 6 and be a little bit of a goal scorer. He can kill some penalties. I think if the Maple Leafs brought him in and at a reasonable contract, I know that, that the Leafs could use a player like that. I think that he actually would be someone who, kind of goes with what the Leafs' new identity is going to be. He played under Jim Hiller when he was here in Toronto. So for me, Connor Brown is a player that I think a lot of Maple Leafs would be happy if they were able to bring him in on a reasonable deal and get him back in town. So Connor Brown comes in for me at number 5.
I've always been a Connor Brown fan. I always thought that simple player, didn't, just did the heart, very versatile, played all around the lineup, played on the penalty kill. and could chip it offensively. Like the last year they had him didn't exactly go well, but I think his role kind of changed in Toronto. I mean, that was a guy you could get 15 goals out of, and he just a decent player all around, I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, ever since he left Toronto, he had the 1 year in Ottawa where it went pretty. 2 years in Ottawa went pretty well. And then he got traded to. Well, eventually left to go to Washington. Got hurt. Took him a while to get back, and now he's in New Jersey. He's still putting up 40 points a year. It's pretty solid for a player like him. Yeah, so not a bad way to start the list.
All right, Connor Brown, number 5. Coming at number 4, I think the Leafs could use a Rasmus Sandin. I think that Toronto could definitely use him, and I feel like the Leafs would be I think Leafs fans would be excited. I don't know if a lot of people are keeping tabs on Rasmus Sandin since he's gone to Washington, but he's actually developed into a pretty solid defenseman and a good two-way guy. Like he's always had some speed. He could skate and break the puck out, but he's actually developed into a pretty good, like I wouldn't say shutdown, but he has certainly improved upon his defensive reliability. And I think he was someone who you could bring into Toronto and play in a third, fourth pair. Like he's really rounded out into a great 4 or 5 defenseman, and that's kind of the sweet spot for I think what Toronto could use. So I think Rasmus Sandin for me could come in at number 4. Like if they moved on from Morgan Riley and that second move was to bring back Rasmus Sandin, I think that'd be a great little fill-in to replace his role as like the team's number 4 defenseman, we'll call it.
Yeah, I mean I think he's would be a good defenseman to give you some puck moving ability. He's not the fastest guy, but he's not the slowest guy either. I think he just he has tools I think would be that would be the Leafs would definitely need on this team. I know right now, I think he's going to be out for a good portion of the year with a knee injury. He's going to be out for a few months. So I've always, that deal, the only saving grace of that trade to Washington was the first round pick that they got back in that deal, because trading Rasmussen for Eric Gustafsson wouldn't exactly have been would not have been the move I would have made. But getting that first round pick, I think that was the Easton Cowan pick, right?
I think so. Yeah, it was either the Easton Cowan pick or was it the one where they moved back for Minton? One of them. I think it was the Easton Cowan pick though. So you end up trading Sandin for Cowan, and that was the year that the Maple Leafs just kind of went all in essentially, and they
it was
revamped their roster. Yeah, it was a very interesting year. His on ice numbers look pretty good though. Like if you look at his like defensive metrics, the high danger chances allowed are quite low. His shots against quite low. So he's a player that I think a lot of Leaf fans didn't keep tabs on when he left, but he's played a really good role out in Washington. He's been part of revamping that team on the fly, I mean he's played pretty well since getting there. So he came in at number 4 for me. At number 3, Nazem Kadri. Nazem Kadri comes in at number 3 for me. I think it's, pretty self-explanatory. I think the Maple Leafs could use a Kadri. They could always use a little bit more beef up the middle, whether it's as the second line center or a third line center. Kadri can still contribute. He's still, a 60 to 70 point guy. He has a little bit of piss and vinegar in him that I think the Leafs solely need up the middle. And it just seems like his heart's always been here in Toronto. And I think if, the Leafs could figure out a way to get Kadri back. I know the contract is not great, so I certainly don't think the Leafs would love to do it, based on the deal he's on. But if, like Colorado be willing to eat money, which I don't see happening, I'm just saying, I think that the Leafs would welcome a reunion there, or if there's a buyout of some kind, could potentially be a reunion down the road at a cheaper deal. But Nazem Kadri, to me, would make Leaf fans ecstatic if he came back to Toronto. So he comes in at number 3 for me.
Yeah, I've always thought that, he just brings a different element, to his game with the tenacity he plays with. And we knew when Nazem Kadri was traded that it's just like, like that's one where like the only reason people justified it was him getting suspended in the playoffs. Like, that was the only reason you kind of decided to make that move, is because you were worried that he kind of stepped over the line too much, and especially in Toronto where the microscope is on you. The league throws the book at players a little bit differently too, right? And so
he was deemed as unreliable, right? Availability is your best ability, and he was unavailable when they needed him in the playoffs due to suspension. So that was, and that was back-to-back years. So that, it was easy to, have that opinion back when it happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's now one of the moves that the Maple Leafs regret the most, because they needed a Kadri for like that entire Dubas tenure where they were, first round exit after first round exit. They needed a third line center. They needed someone who had a little bit of jam to them, and Kadri always fit the bill. And unfortunately, Tyson Barrie never worked out the way he was supposed to, and that trade just, looked worse and worse and worse as the years went along. So yeah, Kadri comes in at number 3 for me. At number 2, Zach Hyman. I mean, he's the one that got away. He's always going to be the one that got away. Zach Hyman ends up signing a deal that I think the Maple Leafs could have met. They certainly could have got to the 5.75 that Edmonton offered him, and he would have stayed. He wanted to stay in Toronto. But you talk about a guy who just continued to ascend, became a 50-goal scorer in Toronto, in Edmonton. He was an elite penalty killer. Talk about a guy who had jam, who had motor, who had passion. I mean, he embodied what the Maple Leafs wanted out of a player. And unfortunately, he became his best self in Edmonton instead of developing into that here in Toronto. And it still rubs people the wrong way that they didn't give him the contract and didn't meet the demands. There's reports out there that he would have done it if the Leafs would have came up to like 5 or 5.25. Like, he was willing to leave a little bit of money on the table, but the Leafs weren't willing to get there. They wanted to stay in the 4s, and he had to do what was best for his family and move on. It's worked out pretty well, sitting shotgun to McDavid and Leon for a few years. But man, oh man, if Zach Hyman were to come back to Toronto, boy, would there ever be some parades and parties in the streets. He is considered the one that got away. And, I contemplated having him at number 1, but I think we'll all know who's at number 1 here for obvious reasons. But man, Hyman is still to this day, I think, the biggest fan favorite that was let go.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was near the top of my list too. Just a big part of that Leafs identity went away. Like how he was the type of player that you want players to follow in terms of the work ethic, doing the simple things, not needing to do more than what was needed to, simple player. He, clearly worked, like one of the few guys that worked playing with Austin Matthews, right? Like he knew what his role was. Go and get the puck, go and retrieve the puck for Matthews. And he did that, pretty well for his whole Leafs career. Just heart and soul type of player too. I always said like that was one where, it was tough to see him go. It was even tougher to justify what they did after letting him go. Like to me, that was where I was like, really?
They put that money into like Peter Mrazek and Nick Ritchie, and it's like, that's what you spent the $5.5 million on?
Yeah.
Like Mrazek and Ritchie, really? Like that's why we couldn't sign Hyman, because those two were priority ads for you in free agency. Yeah, it was definitely tough to stomach. Arguably, letting Hyman go trading away Nazem Kadri. You could argue those were the two worst moves of Kyle Dubas's tenure as general manager in Toronto. The two moves that he wished he could undo and have back, I bet you those are right up at the top of the list for him.
And why he let them go, right? Because you had to make money. You had to make room to get the Marner contracts, to get them Matthews, Nylander.
The flat cap kind of stymied the Hyman thing, where they ran out of money. Right, like they expected it to continue to grow when they signed those big contracts to Marner and Nylander and Matthews, and then we obviously know what happened. COVID comes in, flat cap, and all of a sudden there's no more money in the future for all these players, which no one anticipated. So they kind of got screwed in that regard. Now, to this day, I believe that the Maple Leafs got screwed more than any other team by the flat cap, and Hyman was unfortunately the biggest loss from that when it comes to the Maple Leafs. Coming in at number one for me, it's Mitch Marner. I like, as polarizing as Mitch Marner continues to be, especially now with Darren Ferris squawking off. I mean, we talk about teams that you would like to see a reunion with. I still would take Mitch Marner back on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, if all things were equal and he was happy and we could, kumbaya, water under the bridge, would I bring Marner back into the fold? Abso-freaking-lutely. We know how important he is to this team. We know how good of a player he is. And he proved that he can be a playoff performer this year with the Golden Knights. He didn't finish the job, but he got to a cup final. And, for the first couple of games, he was the favorite to win the Conn Smythe for a while. So I think Mitch Marner, the role he plays, the style he plays, the player he is, how talented he is, if you're bringing back any Maple Leaf in the league, how is he not the number one player that you would want to bring back and put back into your lineup? Has to be. He's the best player. Sure, it's controversial, but Mitch Marner is your best former Leaf in the league.
If it's any reason for you not to want Mitch Marner back, it's because of the way it ended versus what he did on the ice. Yeah,
right.
There's people say he didn't bring it in the playoffs. Well, we learned that maybe it's just the way the Leafs are built and how the team operated more so than, it was just a Mitch Marner problem. I think that's been kind of what Darren Ferris was trying to talk about, that it was all Mitch Marner's fault. And I think his play in Vegas kind of, people got irked because it's just like, well, what was that in Toronto? Well, the Vegas Golden Knights knew that they had a team, like the way they built, and they kept saying it, the way that they were built allowed Marner to flourish more, and that's why it didn't work in Toronto. So you would, with this regime, I would take a Mitch Marner absolutely, where, you could put him in the right situations and he can, obviously Austin Matthews would definitely love to have a Mitch Marner back and playing with them and things like that. So it's just, the headaches with it were, I think a lot of fans were okay to say goodbye. Okay. But at the end of the day, you would take a Mitch Marner type player. You would take a guy who can get 80 to, at his worst, 80 points, at his best, 100 points.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there's my list. I got Connor Brown, Rasmus Sandin, Nazem Kadri, Zach Hyman, and Mitch Marner. A couple honorable mentions that didn't make my list. I considered Freddie Anderson. There's a consideration for Fred Anderson, Stanley Cup winner, Fred Anderson, Kasperi Kapanen, JVR, Michael Bunting, a couple of guys who are still available in free agency as well. So there's a couple of honorable mentions as well. Ilya Mikheyev, I considered, because I think Mikheyev would have worked well in the Jim Hiller system here in Toronto. This is a speedy, forechecking penalty killer who could contribute a little bit of offense. But I went with the 5-pack I did. Let me know down below if you got a different 5-pack that you'd prefer to have a reunion with using the Maple Leafs around the NHL. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_ Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.